Welcome, Grognards. My name is Daz Tactic, and this is going to be the top 5 war games, in my opinion, that are coming out in 2024. Now, I think I'm missing a fair few potential war games. I do actually have more on the list, but I didn't rate them all that highly. War games are not typically something that I love, even though I do actually often cover them. I find them overwhelming in terms of just way too much setup time, way too much time per turn to sort of then play out. Having said that, one of my favourite games is very much tied into essentially being a war game. But war games typically look like this, where there's lots and lots of hexes, massive scale with all these different sorts of tokens. The tokens have got what's called NATO symbols, which designate what class of unit they are. Typically they're 20th century, as what you sort of find in these sort of war games. The scale of the map just gets ridiculous. And even more ridiculous. So these end up being monstrously big games. Some of them do anyway. Some of them are fairly compressed, which I do appreciate. I prefer that myself. I like to have almost like a squad type war game, more so than these sort of like grand armies across, for example, in this case, World War II. This is War in the East 2 that we're looking at through here, which came out a couple of years ago, which is sort of considered one of the best war games ever sort of brought out for the computer. But this doesn't extend just to these type of games. So I also wanted to include games, for example, like Hearts of Iron 4, for example, which is not hex-based. It is little, there's lots and lots of, it's still got the scale and the scope of these other big games. The graphics aren't tiles anymore. They are basically presented as actual units, but they still have like a very much a war game mechanic to them. Maybe not as pure as what we're sort of seeing through there. So Hearts of Iron 4 would be an example of what I would include as a war game in this sort of category. Similarly, Panzer Corps 2, which is what we're looking at right now, is an exceptional war game. It is actually a war game, even though the graphics are not tiles. They're actually 3D models. I've got to say, by the way, if you are looking for a great war game, Panzer Corps 2 is not what Panzer Corps 1 was. And I want to spend a bit of time with this, but I'll give an honourable mention. I don't know if there's more content coming for Panzer Corps 2. If I knew that there was content coming, it would possibly be at the top of this list. It would probably be number 1. But I do want to actually mention it because there's been updates, or there's been content that's just come out in December. This game is unbelievably good for a number of reasons. First of all, Panzer Corps 1 was sort of scripted, like where basically there were units in set positions, and you would then almost go through like a puzzle for each actual map that you played. Now there's not, well, there is random maps, so I'll give it a big plus there for the random maps in the game as well. But the maps that they have, what they had to do with Panzer Corps 2, and I will spend a bit of time talking about this because there's only 5 games that I'm really going to be going through anyway, but I do want to push Panzer Corps 2 here a little bit because, if I knew there was content coming, I think it would be my number 1. I don't think there's anything that would really sort of be able to get in the way of this. As I said, the reasons is that in Panzer Corps 2, they sort of they started from the ground up, or ground and then been built up from there. And what they did was they decided to actually build the AI to be able to not just be triggered as you reach a certain point on the actual map, meaning that all the maps are scripted and then the AI responds accordingly. They've tried to now make the AI interact with the player, which allows for the random maps. And this is a big deal for this particular game. This is actually, for this franchise of games, this is a massive deal. So that's one thing. The other thing that they do exceptionally well, which I just wish more games would do this, is it has a system where the RNG, the random number generator that's actually used in the game, has got a slider that ranges from 0 RNG, and meaning maximum, if it's going to do 20 points of damage, then it will do the 20 points of damage, through to allowing a full RNG where it might be doing anywhere from 0 to 40, for example, with 20 being the average. But you've got a slider, so the default for the game is 50-50, meaning that you might sort of like do between, say, 10 and 30 in the example that I just gave. It would sort of be tighter numbers. But what it means is that you don't notice the RNG the negativity that you get with a lot of games where the RNG really does your head in. For example, like XCOM type games where the RNG, you just feel ripped off. You don't feel that in this game, but it still actually has an RNG, but it's entirely up to the player as to how much RNG you allow into the game. And I've got to say, this is revolutionary in this particular game. And I do want to highlight this because for a game that does use random number generation, and most war games do, just that mechanic alone is worth an awful lot to me, and it's something that I think more games should actually look at and sort of try to adopt. There's a lot of other games that where the RNG really does your head in, to the point where I hate playing some of the games that I play. I enjoy them until I have a really bad turn because of the random number generator. In this game, you don't notice it because of this slider. So as I say, massive kudos to the devs of Panzer Corps 2. It wasn't easy for them to start again, essentially, with coding the AI to be able to respond in whatever situation they're in. It's not a perfect AI, like it's not even a great AI really, but it is still, it's still that they've made it so that we can now have random maps, which is a first in this particular series of games. So anyway, honourable mention for Panzer Corps 2. If there is more DLC coming out, then this would be probably my number one, I would think, or at least up close to number one. As it stands, I'll give it an honourable mention because I just don't know, and there has been just recent updates or recent DLC coming out for it. There may be, I just don't know. So Panzer Corps 2, honourable mention. Let's get into the actual list now. With the actual list, what I've done is I've designated them again into the 4 different categories that we've had in the other games in this particular series. User interface / user experience is like one designation. Replayability. Now, a lot of the war games, because they're scripted maps and set maps, rate lowly in replayability. So some of them rate very low because you're just playing at the same game over and over again, which is still interesting if you're into history and things like that. But replay wise, you don't really have a lot. But the actual content, like War in the East 2, you can play that for months basically. Sort of just play a single game of that. And again, the random number generator will then sort of give you a different result, but it's still the same setup. So replay value I would rate low in a lot of these war games. The third factor that we're sort of looking at is the gameplay and the game mechanics. And as I say, this game here would rate a 9 out of 10 for me, just simply because of what they've done with the game mechanics. The game mechanics with that, as I said before, that random number generator system of having the slider where you can choose how much RNG you want to inject into the game yourself. This rate, that would push this one way up. And also the fourth category is just my own personal preference as to how much I want to be playing a particular game. And so my personal preference, normally I would do these and it would be all about my own personal preference. In this case, I'm not doing it. I'm sort of trying to get like a bit of a combination between those 4 different factors to then get the list. So that's where we are. Let's start with number 5. Broken Arrow. This is probably one of the most anticipated games coming out in 2024. Not just a war game, but just a game in general. The user interface / user experience does look exceptional in the sense that it's a beautiful looking game. The actual information in the game, because I have got the beta, I've been playing the beta a little bit, is exceptional. This one is probably one of the highest rated in that sort of category. Why it's number 5 and not higher in my listing is for a couple of reasons. I don't want to be playing the game. That's one thing. I'll come back to that one in just a minute. But the replayability, I'm suspect about it because I don't think there's going to be much randomization. I think you'll be playing scenarios, and the scenarios will be set up for you. You will have some agency as to what forces you bring into those scenarios, but the maps that you play will essentially just be the maps that are with the game, or I don't know if there'll be other maps modded in as well. But this is actually, as I said before, it's a very highly anticipated game. But that's one aspect that I'm not uncomfortable with it. I just think that there's not going to be much replay value once you sort of get into the game itself. I may be completely wrong about that. I hope I am. The other side is the gameplay aspect of it. Now, the reason that I don't rate the gameplay of this game very highly from a war game perspective is because it's real time. And real time, it's also designed for multiplayer real time, which means that there's not going to be any pause. You're just going to be sort of moving forces around and doing different things. So the actual units themselves, the way that they interact in the combat, is a bit dumbed down. a little bit from what I've played. There was an open demo many months ago now that I sort of played, and I wasn't entirely comfortable with the way that was modelled. Certainly, if you're playing single player, it's got an active pause, which is great, but it doesn't have the in-depth interaction of a game, for example, like Combat Mission, where Combat Mission is a WeGo system where you actually sort of give orders, you spend a lot of time designing the orders, and then every bullet is then modelled in the turn where everything plays out for that 1 minute of gameplay, and then you give the next lot of orders. So I was sort of thinking it might be similar to that. Now, some of course, rockets and things are all modelled incredibly well. You can see here the user interface on the screen here at the moment. It is a beautiful user interface, but it's just that whole gameplay where it's abstracted to a degree, particularly with infantry. So it does have infantry, but they're not really modelled all that well in terms of the actual combat. You don't. When you compare it to something like Combat Mission, my preference would be something like Combat Mission, even though it's an older type game, simply because I prefer turn-based. So this will be a massive game, so don't get me wrong about that. And I'm not saying it's a bad game by any stretch by only having it at number 5. Number 5 is still a very, very good game. It's just not my type of game. So I'm looking forward to playing it greatly, and it is going to be awesome, but it is more abstracted than a lot of other games. And this is the only the only real-time game that I actually have in my top 5. There were others real-time. I found that when I had a real-time war game type game, I was rating it low because of all these different aspects, and also for my own personal preference. I'm not keen on playing real-time games where I feel under pressure. I like to be playing turn-based games. That's really where that's what my wheelhouse is with the games that I tend to be liking to play. Having said, I do like some real-time games if they've got an active pause. This one does have the active pause. It just doesn't have the detail then with the active pause. Hope that makes sense. Anyway, that's my number 5. Okay, now Armour Brigade 2, I think, is coming out in 2024. I hope so. Armour Brigade 1 was an exceptionally good game. It is a real-time, but it's pausable real-time. So it's very, very well done. I think there's going to be, from what I've seen of the screenshots of Armour Brigade 2, it does look very, very interesting. It is going to be based on tiles to a degree, but with 3D interaction within those particular tiles. I'm really looking forward to seeing what this one actually does bring. But a lot of unknowns for me about Armour Brigade 2. I'm really not sure when it's coming out. I've just showing you here Armour Brigade 1, which is fairly old now, but it was very, very well received, this game, for the people who did like war games. As I say, active pause, even though it was real time. It worked very, very well. Like, you could sort of zoom from way out to right in. The actual maps that came with it, you would actually then select your battlefield yourself within those actual maps from real world locations. Beautiful, beautiful game. So anyway, really looking forward to Armour Brigade 2. I'm not sure when it's coming, but that's my number 4 easily. It may end up going much, much higher depending on what actually does come when I do get my hands on the game. Number 3 on my list is Second Front. It's there's a DLC coming, actually. I forget what it's called. What is it called? Bully Beef. Bully Beef is to be free. It was going to be a paid DLC. It's now just going to be a major update. I'm not sure when it's coming, but it's coming very, very soon. Now, Second Front. There's a lot to like about this game. If you're unsure about playing war games, have a look at Second Front. Second Front is scripted maps, so that's why it's rating number 3 on this particular list. Again, if it had more randomization, it would rate much, much higher. It's a great entry-level war game. It's very, very small. You're just really dealing with squads, but in a war game type setting. So you're playing on a hex map. You're not dealing with tokens. You are dealing with 3D graphics, but you are dealing with cards of the actual units. You can see in the bottom corner. I'll just see if I can find a graphic that will then show this. No, we're not seeing it there. I wouldn't mind sort of trying to just show the card system. That's funny. It's not actually really presenting it all that well. This is part of the video that they've actually got. So I've just pulled it up here because it gives you an idea as to what what you can do once you sort of are playing the game. Now, a lot of the game you don't see all these little cards, but the cards do present information very much like traditional war games where you've got the tiles that have the information on the actual tiles themselves. In this case, you've got individual units that are displayed as you then bring up something to then go and do with a unit that you've got selected. In this case, it's the actual tank that's just at the very, very bottom of the screen, half off, not the one that we can see that's fully in the screen, but the one that's below that one is the one that we're sort of then using. So I'm pretty sure that's the one that's actually highlighted. And so we've got different ways of fighting in the game. So it's a great way to just see if you like war game type games. It's not strictly a war game as such, but it plays very much like one. A lot to love about this game. The card system is easy to understand. Once you sort of get used to the bits and pieces, there's all of the information is presented to you when you're sort of trying to figure out which way to go with something. You've got suppression. You've got all sorts of different mechanics in this game. It's an exceptionally good game. The only thing, as I said before, it doesn't have random maps, but the user interface and user experience is really, really good. The replayability is lowish because of the lack of random maps. The gameplay mechanics are very pure, very simple to actually sort of comprehend. But then when you mesh them all together, there's a great degree of complexity that you can then, as the player, try to figure out the best way to move forward with something. The units tend to be very much like what I was saying before about Panzer Corps 1. They tend to be scripted on the maps. So you end up with you get a little bit of randomization with placement of units, but they don't trigger until you reach a certain point on the map. And this is, again, why I sort of would rate the gameplay and the replayability down, because it's not actually fully, the AI isn't really understanding how to control their own units. So they just get triggered, then they go and do different things that they've been coded to do. So that's sort of how the map system works, which, as I say, could be better in the sense of, replayability, but it's a great game. So if you are wanting to just see if you're trying to get into wargaming, you just don't know, Second Front is really, really cool in this sense, because it will give you a feel for whether you do want to then step up into the full-on war games where you're using the little tiles and playing it that way. So I do highly recommend this for anyone who is wanting to get into wargaming as an entry level into it. Number 2, one of my all-time favourite games, Shadow Empire. Now, Shadow Empire will be getting more updates through the year. There may be some DLC coming this year as well, but it's an exceptional game. You can sort of see in different portions there will be war game-like components that we can then sort of have a bit of a look at. So definitely, you can see through here the hex base that we see from traditional war games, the tiles back in through this other side as well with the different types of units on them. In this case, you can actually switch these to NATO symbols if you want them to. There's a little NATO symbol in the corner there showing that these are just infantry. What have we got next? This is what an amazing game this is. It's for me, I classify this as a war game first, a 4X second, but others who I argue with all the time classify this as a 4X first and a war game second. But you can see the actual map itself very, very much with the traditional war game feel about it. Again, this is such a beautiful game. It's incredible. So you can see through here, we've even got little aliens that we've got to then fight. This is space age. You've got different random planets, all sorts of different classes of planets. In this case, we've got sort of like almost like an Earth-like with grass and forest, for example. What else are we going to show in through here? That would be more grasslands, a bit more desert sort of back over this other side. This is all the other bits and pieces. I won't go through all of those. But this is a game that I can't recommend highly enough. It's complex, though, which is also one of the reasons it doesn't end up at number 1, just because of the complexity. It's a very, very complex game. But this is incredible, this game. And so it's a game where you basically end up with, you can build your own planets very, very easily. Everything is thought of. It's one of the most detailed planet building sort of map building games that I've seen. The maps are random, which is fantastic. I love that. So it ticks all my boxes. Procedural generation, incredible depth to what it does do. The combat is like from a war game. Combat is exceptional. The 4X side, in fact, you can see down the bottom there. It's a strategy, simulation, 4X RPG war game. I didn't include it in my RPGs. I did have it in the list, but I didn't actually put it in the video for RPGs. I thought I can't squeeze it into that many different things. Even though it does have those components. So I took it out of that. Otherwise, it would be at the top of that list as well. But this is certainly a strategy simulation war game, 4X war game. So there's a lot to love about this game if you like those sort of games. As I say, one of my all-time favourite games. I could play this game for decades and not get sick of it. It's very, very intricate, very, very detailed. And the war game aspects, the replay value in the war game aspects is not dramatically different every time you play it. It's very much like most other war games where they play the same sort of way, but the fact that you're playing on a random planet each time makes it very, very different, the way it sort of does work. And you've also then got a tech tree as well, which quite often war games don't actually have. So lot to love about this particular game. Can't recommend it highly enough. Shadow Empire, my number 2, simply because I know there will be more updates coming this year, and the updates are really, really getting exciting at this point in time. And for number 1, my most anticipated game of the year. Now, this is 0.1 ahead of Shadow Empire. So just put that into perspective. 1% of the total score difference between Shadow Empire being number 1 and this one being number 1. But Headquarters, World War II. We've actually gone through there. This again is one of these games where it's going to be a great entry-level war game, where there will be war game mechanics. It looks exceptional. It is a turn-based game. I'll just read what it says through here. So Headquarters World War II is a fast-paced turn-based strategy game. Now, normally when it says fast-paced, I just turn off at that point. But in this case, it just means that the actual gameplay is going to be compressed. It's not going to be one of these massive War in the East 2 type games where every turn takes you hours to play. In this case, it is designed to be played quickly, which is great. And so I'm not sure when this is coming, by the way, but I'm really looking forward to it. So World War II is a fast-paced, turn-based strategy game where your battlefield tactics are as important as your army management skills. Experience both sides of the war battling in Europe as the USA, the UK, or Germany. So storm bunkers, occupy houses, win tank duels. Now, the mechanics of this are very war game like, where there's detail. There's a lot of detail going on. It is turn-based, I think I'm pretty sure it is turn-based. You've got a random map generator. There we go. This is also probably why it bumped up a bit more highly, because you can actually build random maps. Now, you still have to curate them, I think, so it's not as if you can just play on them. Hopefully at some point there will just be build me a random map and let me play the game. But you can see it's based on just a grid. It's sort of like it's in the sense of what it's going to be building, it's going to be fairly simplistic, the actual maps themselves. They're very linear, the actual maps. But I'm really looking forward to this game. I think it's going to be an unbelievably good game. I think it's going to be a little bit more like a combat mission sort of style war game. That's how I would imagine it. But I've got no idea, except that I'm really excited to play this particular game. It does look amazingly good. Anyway, guys, that's my top 5 coming war games in 2024. There probably are a lot more that I just haven't really sort of come across that would actually hit the high-ish numbers of what I'm looking forward to with the wargaming. I do like war games, but not the big complex ones. I like it. I like this sort of style of war game. Anyway, hope it's been helpful. Hope it's shown you a few other games that you may be interested in coming up. There's a few other games that didn't quite squeak into my top 5, but anyway, it's going to be again great year for gaming in 2024. I only had 5 as my top 5 in wargaming, but there may be others as well. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe. I will catch you in the next video.